Yesterday, Apple held their September event, and within it they unveiled the iPhone 13 and 13 Pro lineups. As a part of the new features aimed at video, two really stood out to me as some very interesting additions. Cinematic mode, which will make its way to both the iPhone 13 and 13 Pro models, and ProRes Video Recording, which will only be available on the Pro. So before these phones are released, I wanted to give you my initial impressions of what this means for people wanting to use these devices to capture video. Starting with cinematic mode, this one had me really intrigued because I had a lot of questions while watching the initial sample they showed. Questions like, how is this possible on such a small sensor? How can you choose where the focus should go while you're filming? And of course, who done it? The fact is, given how small the camera sensor is, and therefore the relationship to the lens, smartphones simply can't generate that kind of depth of field through hardware alone. But from my understanding, what Apple is doing here is generating a depth map using the machine learning on the device. If you've ever used portrait mode on an iPhone or similar feature on Android, the idea is the same. However, video is always much more of a challenge for this kind of thing because the phone has to go from getting it right for one frame to suddenly 30 frames per second continuously. What I really liked about this feature is, in typical Apple fashion, they made it much more accessible to the everyday person. It's not buried away in settings or requiring you to watch a YouTube video on how to use it. It can detect people in the scene, it knows where they're looking, it will automatically rack focus when someone new enters the frame, or if the talent looks off to another area, and best of all, if the phone gets it wrong, you can simply adjust the focus later through the Photos app, which honestly might be the most impressive part of all of this. The focus pulls were sometimes a little jumpy and experienced some heavy breathing in the samples they showed off, but the depth of field appeared really natural, and thankfully, it didn't seem to suffer from the usual issues we tend to see with portrait mode, where the phone may misinterpret a complicated scene and blur or not blur the wrong parts of the frame. Of course, Apple probably wouldn't have shown that anyway, at least in this event, and these examples were helped by having professional, well-lit sets. But to see a phone pull off these kind of shots was something that really got me excited. It's important to note that as of now, the feature will be limited to 1080p at 30 frames per second, and I'm still keen to see where this feature would break in the real world, because this is all based in software, and it's likely the depth map the phone produces won't be perfect every time. Like in portrait mode, I would say it's best to use a well-lit scene and not have any objects that are too complex with multiple cutouts in your shot. But until the phone is released, we'll just have to wait and see. Next, let's move to ProRes. First of all, this feature is only available on the Pro models of the iPhone 13, which is fair enough, it's in the name, right? ProRes? And my initial thoughts for this is, as someone who's attempted to use an iPhone for shooting video, is that it'll be nice to have a codec that is more robust to use for editing. As Apple explained in their event, heavily compressed codecs the iPhone currently uses aren't great for traditional editing. They generally require more power for the computer to play them back, and they also have to throw away a lot of data too. Right now, apps like Filmic Pro on iOS allow you to record higher bitrate footage and capture in a flat log profile, but it's still highly compressed. For reference, capturing log footage is really helpful because it allows you to be more flexible with your color grading and dialing in your look later on in the editing process. But on a lot of cameras, including the iPhone, having a relatively low bitrate and sample rate mean that it's not advised to do this. Because what this feature is doing is effectively compressing the sensor's entire dynamic range into a smaller area, assuming later on in editing, you're going to uncompress it back to the proper color and luminance ranges. And once you start to do this on low bitrate footage, you're going to notice it start to break pretty quickly, resulting in blocking and noise throughout the image, just because you don't have enough data there. ProRes will really help with this kind of use case if you're someone who wants to use the phone to produce more professional content and/or mix it with other, more professional cameras. However, at this point, Apple hasn't given us the exact ProRes specifications, including the sample rate it's capturing, which could impact how useful this new codec is. It's also important to remember ProRes takes up much more space compared to a more compressed format, which is why Apple has now made a 1TB model available for the iPhone 13 Pro, and it ain't gonna be cheap. And if you only sprung for the 128GB model, you'll be limited to capturing ProRes in 1080p at 30 frames per second. The real question being, who is using their iPhone to produce professional content? And if you're spending this much to get ProRes on your phone, whether you might be better buying a dedicated camera with something like a Ninja 5 recorder to get ProRes. Of course, the trade-off being that it wouldn't be pocketable, but it would allow you to get even better results, especially in low light due to having a larger sensor. I guess that would all come down to your use case and whether that matters to you. I would say ProRes definitely feels like a feature for a niche market at the moment, but I can't complain about having the option. And it's all just pushing these phones into becoming more professional video tools. And that does bring me to my final thoughts. I'm really excited about the future of video production, especially as technologies like this continue to develop. I would love to have a pocketable camera that allows me to capture really high quality video, and having depth of field and focus as a tool to tell my stories would just be next level. Also, having professional codecs so I'm not compromising on quality and being able to shoot in a log profile would also be a really nice addition as well. And while I believe there will still be a place for bulkier, dedicated cameras, what you'll be able to achieve with something in your pocket will just allow for the creation of different and very in-the-moment stories, given the speed and ease at which you can capture. And I'm also really excited for the next generation of filmmakers too, who are now growing up with these tablets and smartphones as some of their first cameras they'll use. Having tools like cinematic mode will just give them, and everyone else, a much bigger canvas to be creative with. And while I want to remain as positive as possible, I will say there are some downsides to using your phone as a production tool, as I found out myself over the years. Receiving notifications while on set, having the video recording stop when you receive a call, and managing space between your personal photo library, music, apps, and the videos on the project you're currently recording are just some of the challenges. It's like anything, when you try to combine a lot of devices into one, you're going to have to make some compromises. The iPhone 13 may not deliver the perfect future I've just outlined, but these video features are definitely helping pave the way for it. Personally, I'm just waiting to one day see a video where I don't know it's shot on a smartphone and only find out later to my disbelief. And to be honest, cinematic mode was getting pretty close. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed the video. Drop me a like if you did, and let me know what you think about these features, and whether you're planning to upgrade to an iPhone 13. Subscribe for more content like this, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.